My girlfriend lied about her past and said I was controlling. So I found the truth, left her quietly, and she still tells everyone I vanished. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I've never been great at spotting red flags. Maybe it's optimism. Maybe it's just me wanting to believe in people. This all started when I met her at a mutual friend's party. She had this energy that pulled you in, laughing like she owned the room, eyes always dancing, and the kind of smile that made you forget your own name. I couldn't believe someone like her existed in my normal, boring little world. At first, everything was effortless. Our conversations flowed, and she shared little bits about herself, where she grew up, her hobbies, funny childhood stories. I felt seen, understood, like maybe I had finally met someone who could love me without the usual complications. Of course, there were moments that made me pause. Tiny things like hesitations when I asked about old friends, or her brushing off questions about her past. But I shrugged them off. Everyone has skeletons, right? The more time we spent together, the deeper I fell. I started rearranging my weekends, thinking of future dates, imagining late-night talks on our balcony, imagining life in her apartment where her laughter would echo through the rooms. She was intoxicating. Even now, I can remember the smell of her perfume that night. Something floral, a little sweet but sharp, and how it clung to my jacket hours later. But beneath that charm, subtle tensions were already lurking. Little comments about me being too attentive or needing to chill made me laugh nervously. I told myself it was just playful teasing, nothing serious. Yet, a small voice in my head whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was more going on than I could see. By the end of that first week, I was hooked. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Couldn't stop replaying every laugh, every touch, every smile. I wanted to believe in us completely, but little did I know. The foundations of what I thought was love were already cracked, and the cracks were about to widen. I should have known things weren't as perfect as they seemed, but I was too far gone to care. I remember the first time she said I was too controlling. It wasn't anything major, just a joke about me checking in when she didn't reply to a text for a few hours, but the words hit differently than she intended. At the time, I laughed it off, making a joke back about her disappearing act. But later that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the sting. It planted the first seed of doubt in my mind, and yet I told myself it was nothing. As the weeks went by, these little comments became more frequent. She would sigh dramatically when I asked where she'd been, or roll her eyes when I tried to make plans together. Friends noticed, but I ignored them, thinking they didn't understand our dynamic. It's fine, I kept telling myself. She's just joking. She's under stress. It's me being sensitive. Every time she'd flash that smile that made my chest tighten, and I'd forgive her instantly. I started noticing more small lies, things that didn't add up. Stories about old friends would change slightly each time she told them, and certain names or places felt deliberately vague. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I kept making excuses for her, brushing off my gut instinct. My friends warned me about red flags, but I laughed nervously, feeling defensive, like maybe they didn't really know her as I did. Evenings spent together became a mix of joy and tension. I'd watch her laugh at something on TV, the light catching her hair, and think, this is exactly why I can't leave. But under that surface, every joke about me being controlling, every fleeting inconsistency was carving little cracks in my trust. The emotional roller coaster had begun, and then came the night she accused me, out of nowhere, of not trusting her. I was shocked. I had no idea she would twist my growing suspicions into a narrative where I was the villain. My chest tightened, and for the first time I wondered if I'd already fallen too far, too fast. I thought love could fix everything. But sometimes, love blinds you to the truth right in front of you. I never thought I'd catch her in a lie. Not because I didn't pay attention, but because I didn't want to. The first time it happened, I stumbled across a social media post she had forgotten to delete. A photo from a weekend she'd told me she spent alone, scrolling with a smile, laughing with someone she never mentioned. My stomach dropped. I felt the floor beneath me shift, the familiar warmth of trust freezing into icy doubt. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's just a friend, I told myself. Maybe she forgot to mention it. But then came the messages. Casual comments from people I'd never met, tagging her in places that didn't exist in the stories she'd shared. Her carefully curated past was crumbling, piece by piece, under my growing suspicion. That night, I confronted her gently, hoping to hear a simple explanation. "Why didn't you tell me about that weekend?" I asked. She tilted her head, gave that sly smile, and said, "I don't know. Maybe you're just imagining things. You're too controlling, you know that?" It was infuriating. Not because of the accusation, but because she twisted the truth, making me feel guilty for noticing. I spent the next few days obsessively replaying every conversation, every vague story, every small inconsistency. My heart ached and sleep felt impossible. I realized I had fallen for someone who had built an elaborate version of herself, and I had been blind to it. The closer I looked, the more holes I found. Every little lie began to stack, turning into a mountain I couldn't ignore. And then, I found something bigger. A message she sent years ago to an old friend, casually mentioning a serious past relationship she'd claimed never existed. It wasn't just a lie. It was a betrayal layered with deception. My hands shook as I read it over and over. How could someone fabricate parts of their life so effortlessly and then turn around to accuse me of being controlling? I realized, in that moment, that the person I loved wasn't the person I thought she was, and the real battle was just beginning. I finally decided I had to say something. I couldn't keep spinning in circles, questioning my own sanity while she smiled and accused me of overreacting. One evening, I confronted her calmly, trying to stay rational. I saw those posts, the pictures, the messages. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Her reaction hit me like a punch. She laughed, lightly, almost dismissively, then leaned closer and said, "I can't believe you're being like this. You're so controlling. Why can't you just trust me?" The words were sharp, like knives, but she coated them in charm. I felt my heart pound in my chest, trying to argue, trying to explain that not trusting someone who lied repeatedly isn't controlling. It's self-preservation. I could see the tension building in her eyes, the small twitch in her jaw that betrayed annoyance. She wasn't afraid. She was defensive, almost practiced. Every accusation she threw back at me was a mirror of my own doubt, reflected and twisted until I felt guilty for even noticing. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand honesty, but all I managed was a shaky, I can't understand why you'd lie." The apartment felt smaller suddenly. The faint smell of her perfume mixed with the leftover dinner I'd brought over earlier. The room was too warm, the lights too bright, and the laughter I once found comforting now sounded hollow. My stomach churned as I realized I was standing on a battlefield I hadn't signed up for. Emotional landmines set by someone I trusted completely. After a tense silence, she gave that half-smile, the one that made my heart ache despite everything. "Maybe you should just calm down," she said, walking toward her bedroom. I was left there, frozen, feeling small and unmoored. I knew I couldn't trust her, yet the part of me still loved her, still wanted her to be the person I thought she was. And in that moment, I understood that nothing would get easier if I stayed, and the real truth might be worse than I imagined. After that confrontation, I couldn't stop thinking about her lies. I knew I had to find out the full truth, even if it hurt me to pieces. So, late one night, I started digging. I went through old social media accounts, long-forgotten friends' pages, and even some public records she hadn't mentioned. Every click, every post, every old photo felt like peeling back layers of a mask she had worn for years. At first, the inconsistencies were small: misremembered dates, vague explanations, stories that didn't line up. But then I stumbled onto something bigger. A long-forgotten blog post she had written years ago, talking about someone she called "my first love," in a way she had always denied existed. A name I had never heard before. A city far from the one she had claimed she'd lived in at the time. My hands shook as I scrolled through old messages between her and this person, reading about trips, promises, and things she had actively erased from my life. I couldn't believe how easily she had fabricated her past. And worse, she had made me feel guilty for asking questions while spinning a completely different story. Rage and heartbreak collided inside me. I felt stupid for falling for her, for ignoring those early red flags, for trusting someone who had been lying from the start. Then came the real shock. I discovered evidence of a serious relationship she had not only lied about but actively hidden as if it never existed. The man wasn't just an old fling. He was someone she had loved deeply, someone she had cheated on or left abruptly, yet in our conversations, she painted herself as inexperienced and single. My stomach turned as the pieces fell together. The inconsistencies, the accusations that I was controlling, the guilt trips. It all made sense now. I realized I was in a relationship built entirely on deception. My hands tightened into fists and my chest felt like it was being crushed. The love I thought we shared had been a lie, wrapped in charm and manipulation. I had reached the midpoint twist, the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally understood the full depth of her deceit. And in that silence, I knew the only way forward was to leave. But how could I do it quietly, without giving her the satisfaction of a dramatic confrontation? I hit rock bottom that night. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, scrolling through every message, every post, every scrap of evidence I had uncovered. My chest felt heavy, my hands cold and trembling. The person I loved, the person I had imagined a future with, didn't exist. She had built this entire world where I was the controlling villain, and she was flawless. I felt like a fool for ever believing in her. The guilt she had made me feel over minor mistakes now seemed like poison. Every joke about me being too attentive, every sigh at my questions, every accusation of jealousy, it all made sense now. She wasn't just hiding her past. She had weaponized my love and trust against me. I remembered nights where I had stayed up worried about her, where I had rearranged my life to fit hers, and now it all felt meaningless. I called a friend, trying to make sense of it, but words failed me. I don't even know who she really is, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. They tried to reassure me, but I could hear the concern in their voice, and it made my chest ache even more. I was alone in understanding the full scope of her deception. The apartment felt suffocating, walls closing in as if mocking me. I could still smell her perfume lingering in the air, a cruel reminder of how close I had been to someone who didn't exist. My stomach churned, my head ached, and tears came unbidden. I had reached the lowest point emotionally, paralyzed between heartbreak, rage, and the bitter realization that I had to let go entirely. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a spark of clarity emerged. I knew that staying, confronting her, or pleading for honesty would only trap me longer. I had to reclaim my life. I had to leave, not with an argument, not with a scene, but quietly, strategically, for my own peace. The hardest part wasn't the heartbreak, it was knowing I had to vanish from someone who still thought she controlled my world. After that night, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't confront her. She would twist it into another story where I was the villain. The only way forward was silence, precision, and disappearing without giving her the satisfaction of a fight. I spent days quietly planning my exit, mapping out every step like a strategy, calculating the timing, the logistics, the smallest details that could go wrong. I started with the practical things, packing a bag I could carry quickly, moving important documents and valuables out without raising suspicion, and slowly untangling myself from digital connections. Every message I deleted, every subscription I canceled, every account I logged out of felt like reclaiming pieces of myself she had tried to control. The apartment still smelled faintly of her perfume, a ghostly reminder of what I was leaving behind, and it made my chest tighten with both relief and sadness. I rehearsed the steps in my mind over and over, imagining her discovering my absence. Would she panic? Would she accuse me to friends and family? My gut twisted thinking about the lies she'd already spread about me. Still, I reminded myself, this was about my peace, my sanity, my freedom. I couldn't allow her manipulation to control my story any longer. There was a tension in my body I couldn't shake. Packing a bag wasn't just about clothes. It was about reclaiming life from someone who had built a labyrinth of lies around me. I felt a strange mix of liberation and fear, the fear that she might find me, The fear of facing the unknown and the relief that finally I was taking control. I knew that when the day came to leave, it had to be silent, calculated, and complete. No confrontations, no explanations, no last words. Only freedom and the weight of finally walking away. The night I left, everything felt surreal. I packed the last of my things quietly, my hands moving almost automatically like a soldier executing a mission. The apartment was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls, and the faint scent of her perfume lingered like a ghost I couldn't shake. Every step toward the door was a mixture of fear, relief, and heartbreak. I kept thinking, this is it. No turning back. I paused for a moment at the threshold, glancing at the living room, the couch where we had shared laughter, the kitchen where we had cooked together, even the faint stain on the carpet I had always ignored. Each memory hit me like a weight, but I couldn't let sentiment stop me. I had to vanish, to reclaim the life she had tried to manipulate and define. The streets outside were quiet, the kind of silence that presses into your chest and makes every sound sharper. I could hear my own breathing, the distant hum of traffic, and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Each step I took away from that apartment felt like a small victory and a small grief at the same time. My heart ached for what I had lost, but I felt the tight chains of manipulation slowly unravel. I didn't contact her, didn't leave a note. There would be no confrontation, no dramatic exit. That was her world, and I refused to play by her rules any longer. I was silent, invisible, and determined. The thought of her discovering my absence and not understanding it brought a strange sense of satisfaction. She would have to face the consequences of her lies without dragging me into her narrative. By the time I reached the next block, the weight on my shoulders had lightened slightly, but the thought lingered. She would never truly know what had happened, and I would finally be free to start again. Once I was gone, the world felt different, lighter, yet strangely alien. I moved into a small apartment a few neighborhoods away, changed routines, and disconnected from everything that reminded me of her. Even simple things like grocery shopping or sitting in a coffee shop felt like reclaiming space that had been stolen from me. Every step forward was tinged with relief, but also a low hum of anxiety. What if she tried to find me? What if she spread more lies? I focused on rebuilding. Therapy became a lifeline, a space to untangle the confusion, guilt, and lingering heartbreak. I reached out to old friends cautiously, reconnecting in ways that reminded me I wasn't alone in the world. The nights were quieter without her constant accusations and manipulations, and the mornings, though lonely at first, began to feel like freedom. The scent of my new apartment, plain and unadorned, became a small comfort, a blank canvas for my new life. Yet the rumors had already begun. Mutual friends hinted at the stories she was spinning. I had vanished. I had been controlling, and I had left without explanation. Hearing her narrative secondhand was infuriating, but I refused to engage. The difference now was I didn't feel the need to defend myself. Her version no longer held power over my emotions. I understood she would always try to control the story, but my focus had shifted to reclaiming my own reality. Slowly, I started enjoying the quiet of normalcy. I could walk in the park without checking my phone every few minutes, laugh freely without overthinking her reactions, and make decisions solely based on my own needs. My heart still ached at times, but it was tempered with clarity. I had been manipulated, lied to, and emotionally twisted, but I had survived, and that survival felt like a victory in itself. Even as her rumors spread, I realized the truth was mine alone, and for the first time in months I felt the fragile, exhilarating taste of freedom. It wasn't long before I started hearing about her version of events. Friends and acquaintances would casually drop phrases like, "She said you just vanished," or, "Apparently, you left because you were controlling." At first, it felt like a punch to the gut. The person I had loved, the person who had lied to me every step of the way, was now rewriting the story and casting me as the villain. I remember one night scrolling through social media, seeing a mutual friend share a story she had told, how I supposedly abandoned her without a word, how I was emotionally abusive, how I left her devastated. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Everything I had done to protect my own sanity was now being spun into some narrative where I was the bad guy. And the worst part? Some people actually believed it. Yet, as furious as I was, I also felt a strange calm. I wasn't going to argue, post screenshots, or justify myself. That was her world, the one built on manipulation and lies, and I had stepped out of it. My energy was too valuable to waste. I let her tell her story, knowing I had the truth locked inside me, unshakable and untouchable. But she didn't stop there. Through friends, she tried to manipulate narratives, casting doubt on my character and subtly planting the idea that I had been abusive. It stung, seeing her weaponize lies to try and maintain control. I could almost picture her smirking, thinking she had me boxed in. But in reality, I had already taken the power away. I was quiet, distant, and untouchable in ways she couldn't comprehend. The shocking part? Even as she spread her tales, I realized she was powerless to affect me now. Her stories could travel far, but my freedom was mine, and nothing she could say would ever change that. Months passed, and I mostly stayed out of her orbit, but the echoes of her lies kept reaching me. Friends relaying things she'd said, casual mentions in conversations, little reminders that she was still trying to manipulate the story. One evening, a friend cautiously mentioned, "She keeps asking about you, saying you just disappeared." My chest tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. I had already chosen silence, and I wasn't about to break it now. It was strange, seeing her through other people's words rather than my own eyes. I could almost picture her. The way she leaned in with that sly smile, the slight tilt of her head when she expected sympathy. I realized she had built an entire narrative where she was the victim, and I was the villain. And yet, I didn't feel the anger I thought I would. I felt empowered. I had already walked away. I had already taken my power back. I reflected on how different things could have been if honesty had been part of our relationship from the start. The manipulation, the lies, the gaslighting, it was all avoidable. But instead of dwelling, I chose to focus on what I had gained: clarity, control, and freedom. Every time someone mentioned her, I simply smiled inwardly, knowing the truth remained mine, untouchable and private. The realization hit me fully. Confrontation wasn't necessary. I didn't need to explain, argue, or justify myself. She could continue spinning her story, but it no longer mattered. I had outgrown the chaos she thrived on. My life was moving forward without her in it, and that was more satisfying than any dramatic showdown could have been. And in that quiet, distant confrontation, I understood that sometimes the most powerful statement isn't words or revenge. It's simply disappearing, letting someone else's lies fail to touch you while you reclaim your own life. Looking back now, I can hardly believe how deeply I was entangled in her lies. The heartbreak, the manipulation, the constant twisting of reality, it all felt like a fog I couldn't escape while I was in it. I replay the memories sometimes, the laughter, the small touches, the moments I thought were love, and I shiver at how convincing the illusion had been. Yet, surviving it has given me a perspective I couldn't have had otherwise. I've learned to trust my instincts, to see red flags early, and to value honesty above charm. I've learned that love without transparency is a trap, and that silence can be a form of power. In leaving quietly, I took back control of my story, my life, and my emotions. I didn't need to scream, confront, or justify myself. I simply walked away, and in that act, I reclaimed freedom. Friends notice the difference in me now. There's a lightness, a quiet confidence, a resilience that wasn't there before. I no longer carry the weight of her lies or the fear of her manipulation. Every decision I make is mine alone, guided by clarity instead of doubt. And though she may continue to tell her version of the story, how I vanished or was controlling, I know the truth, and that is enough. Occasionally, I catch a memory or a trigger, a reminder of the chaos I left behind, but it doesn't hurt the way it once did. There's a peace in knowing that walking away was the only choice that protected my sanity, my heart, and my dignity. I've rebuilt, I've healed, and I've grown stronger in ways I never imagined. In the end, she still tells everyone I vanished. But I didn't vanish. I simply chose myself over deception, freedom over manipulation, and my own life over someone else's lies. And that, more than anything, feels like victory.